I still remember the first time I saw her. Long, wavy hair framing her delicate face, eyes that held an entire universe, and a smile that could brighten the darkest corners of my mind. Camille. I never stood a chance. We were 18, both wide-eyed and idealistic, with dreams so big they felt tangible. But it wasn't me who made the first move, it was Camille. She pursued me with a determination that caught me off guard. She was bold, confident, and sure of what she wanted. And she wanted me. At first, I thought it was a passing crush, something fleeting. But when I saw how effortlessly we fit together, how every conversation flowed like we had known each other forever, I knew. She was it. My soulmate. We shared everything. Late-night talks about the future, whispered secrets under a blanket of stars, promises sealed with laughter and stolen kisses. When her father fell ill, I was there, every step of the way. I held her hand in that cold hospital room, wiped away her tears when she broke down, and whispered reassurances that, deep down, even I wasn't sure were true. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she had told me one night, her voice raw from crying, and I believed her. By 25, life was everything I had ever dreamed of. I had the woman I loved as my wife, a career I was excelling in, and the unwavering support of our families. Everything felt like it had fallen perfectly into place, as if the universe had conspired to align the stars in my favor. Then there was Marcus. Marcus had been my best friend since childhood, the brother I never had. We had been inseparable since the 3rd grade, surviving scraped knees, failed math tests, and the awkward teenage years together. He had always been reckless when it came to women. Charming, confident, the kind of guy who could make any woman swoon with just a look. But when he met Jasmine, something in him changed. She tamed him in ways none of us expected. When they got married, I was his best man. I watched as he swore to love her forever, and for the first time, I believed him. Then came the accident. One rainy night, a car crash took Jasmine away, and with her, a part of Marcus died too. He shut down completely, retreating into a world of grief and silence. He packed up his life and moved back to town, but he wasn't the same. The light in his eyes was gone. The Marcus I knew, the one who always had a joke ready, who could make even the worst situations bearable, was a ghost of himself. I couldn't stand seeing him like that. I tried everything to bring him back. Late-night talks, invitations to dinners, casual outings. But nothing worked. He was drowning, and I was desperate to save him. So I did something I would later regret. I asked Camille to help him. Maybe if he had someone to talk to. Someone who isn't me. "You're good at understanding people," I told her one night. She hesitated at first, not because she didn't want to help, but because she had never really liked Marcus. She had always found him arrogant, a womanizer with no real morals. But for me, she agreed to try. "I'll talk to him. But don't expect miracles," she had said with a small smile. If only I had known. If only I had seen what was coming. Because that one decision, asking my wife to help my grieving best friend, set in motion the slow, excruciating unraveling of everything I held dear. It was the beginning of the end. At first, Camille wanted nothing to do with Marcus. She never hid her feelings about him. She saw him as reckless, a man who had spent most of his life treating relationships like disposable commodities. To her, Marcus had always been the kind of guy who played with fire and didn't care about getting burned. "You really think I'm the right person to help him?" she asked one evening, frowning as she sipped her tea. "He doesn't even like me, and honestly, the feeling is mutual." "It's not about liking each other," I had replied, rubbing my temples. "It's about helping someone who's lost. I just need him to find a way out of this darkness. He's been my best friend for years, Camille. I can't watch him waste away like this." She sighed, still looking unsure. But in the end, she agreed. I should have paid attention to that hesitation. I should have let her refusal stand. At first, things seemed harmless. Camille would check in on Marcus occasionally, stopping by to drop off food, reminding him that people still cared. She wasn't overly friendly, and she didn't linger too long. Just small gestures, things I hoped would help him feel human again. But then something shifted. It started subtly. Camille would bring up Marcus in passing, mentioning how he seemed a little better. I didn't think much of it at the time, After all, that was the goal, right? Then, she started staying longer. I'll be home a little late tonight. I'm taking Marcus out for coffee. He needs to get out of that house. I had smiled, thankful that she was making the effort. That's great. I think it'll be good for him. I was so blind. At first, I justified it all. Marcus was grieving, and Camille was just being kind. If she had the patience to sit with him, to listen to him, then maybe she was doing something I had failed to do. Maybe she was helping in a way I couldn't. But then, little things started adding up. One night, I found her sitting on the couch, texting, a small smile playing on her lips. When I walked in, she quickly turned the phone over. "Who are you texting?" I asked casually. "Oh, just a friend," she replied, brushing me off. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. Marcus was a friend. But something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was overthinking things. Camille had always been warm, always been the kind of person who wanted to help. This was just her way of being supportive, right? Then came the hikes. "Marcus invited me on a hike tomorrow," she mentioned one evening as she changed into her pajamas. "You should come." I frowned. "You know I have work." "Oh, right," she said, pulling her shirt over her head. "I guess it'll just be the two of us then." It didn't sit right with me. But again, I let it slide. Then came the movie nights, ones I wasn't invited to, the private lunches, the inside jokes. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was overreacting. Then, one evening, she came home late. Too late. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice even. "Just out," she said, brushing past me. "With Marcus?" She sighed. "Why do you always ask that? He's my friend too, you know?" I felt a lump form in my throat. My friend. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that wasn't how this worked. But I held my tongue. Until the night I caught her staring at her phone, completely oblivious to me standing there. She was texting again, smiling. Something inside me snapped. "Who are you texting?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked up, startled. "Why are you hovering?" "I'm not. I just asked a question." She rolled her eyes. "It's Marcus." "Why are you texting Marcus at 10 at night?" She sighed, putting her phone down. "Because he's my friend, and he needed someone to talk to. I'm his best friend." "Well, maybe he didn't want to talk to you," she snapped. I froze. She ran a hand through her hair, frustrated. "Look, you're being possessive, and it's really unattractive. I'm helping someone who is struggling, and instead of appreciating that, you're acting like some jealous, insecure husband." My jaw clenched. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" she challenged, crossing her arms. I opened my mouth, then closed it, because I didn't have proof. I didn't have evidence. All I had were feelings, instincts clawing at me, telling me something wasn't right. But Camille was smart. She knew exactly how to make me doubt myself. "I can't believe you don't trust me," she said, shaking her head. "I've given you no reason to doubt me, and yet here we are. Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is that you're too insecure to handle the fact that I can have male friends." I felt my throat tighten. "That's not fair," I said quietly. "No, what's not fair is you treating me like I've done something wrong when all I've done is be there for someone who needs help." The argument ended with her storming off to bed, leaving me standing there, lost in my thoughts. Had I been wrong? Was I reading too much into this? Or was I simply ignoring the truth staring me right in the face? The next morning, Camille dropped a bomb on me. "I need a break," she said, not even looking at me as she packed a small bag. "A break?" My voice cracked. "From what?" "From you," she said simply. "You're suffocating me with your jealousy. I need space. I'm going to my sister's for the weekend." Something inside me told me to check. That night, I called her sister. "Camille," her sister said, confused. "She's not here yet." I thought she was leaving in the morning. My blood turned to ice. I didn't need to ask any more questions. I already knew where she was. I sat on the couch, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Camille wasn't at her sister's place. That much was clear. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. My mind raced through 100 different possibilities, but deep down, I already knew the answer. She was with him. I had spent months trying to push aside the nagging suspicion that had rooted itself deep in my chest, but now there was no denying it. This wasn't just some innocent friendship anymore. Camille had lied to my face, had looked me in the eye and told me she needed a break from me. But she wasn't running to find space. She was running to him. The betrayal felt like a fist to my gut. I wanted to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding, but the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. I replayed every moment over the past few months, every time she pulled away from me, every time she glanced at her phone and smiled, every whispered phone call, every excuse that didn't quite add up. I had been made to feel like a fool. Still, I needed to hear it from her. I dialed her number, my hands shaking as I pressed the phone to my ear. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, she answered. "Hey," Camille said, her voice strangely casual, like she hadn't just torn my world apart. "Where are you?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. There was a pause, a hesitation. "I told you, I needed some space. I'm at my sister's." The anger that had been simmering inside me erupted. "No, you're not." My voice was deadly quiet, but the rage in my chest was deafening. "I called her, Camille. She hasn't seen you." Another pause. Longer this time. She sighed, the sound of rustling fabric filling the silence. "I just needed some time alone. Okay? I booked a hotel for the weekend. I didn't want to deal with any drama." A lie. Another one. "Tell me where you are," I demanded. "Why? So you can come storming in and make a scene?" she snapped. "So I can hear you lie to me in person." She let out a bitter laugh. "God, you're so paranoid. This is exactly why I needed space. You can't just let me breathe." I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, but I wasn't sure if it was real or just another manipulation. "I just need to know one thing," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "Are you with him?" Silence. That was my answer. A cold, nauseating realization settled over me. Camille wasn't just pulling away. She had already chosen someone else. "I can't do this right now," she muttered, and the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. I could drive over to Marcus's place right now. I could storm in, demand answers, demand the truth. But would it change anything? Would it erase the betrayal? Would it undo the lies? A part of me wanted to believe there was still a way to fix this, that this wasn't the end. But another part of me, the part that had been ignored for too long, knew the truth. The woman I had loved, the woman who had once told me she couldn't live without me, had already replaced me, and I was the only one still pretending otherwise. The worst part was that she had convinced me, over and over again, that I was crazy for suspecting anything. I thought back to the first time I had confronted her about Marcus. "You're acting crazy," she had said, her face twisted in disbelief. "You think I would ever do that to you?" "I just don't understand why you spend so much time with him," I had said, feeling guilty for even bringing it up. She had sighed, shaking her head like she was dealing with a child throwing a tantrum. "Marcus is grieving. He has no one else. What do you want me to do? Abandon him?" And I had felt like the villain, like some insecure, controlling husband who couldn't handle his wife having friendships. Now, I saw it for what it was. Gaslighting. She had made me question my own instincts, had twisted every valid concern into something ridiculous, something jealous. And I had let her. But not anymore. I grabbed my keys, my hands still trembling, and walked out the door. I wasn't going to let her lie to me any longer. I knew exactly where she was. The drive to Marcus's house felt like an eternity. Every second, every red light, every turn on the road felt like torture. My knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. When I pulled up to his house, my suspicions were confirmed before I even stepped out of the car. Camille's car was parked right there. She wasn't even trying to hide it. Something inside me snapped. I stepped out of the car, my heart hammering in my chest, and walked toward the front door. My body moved on autopilot, my mind numb. My fingers curled around the doorknob. It was unlocked. The audacity. I stepped inside, my entire world about to shatter, and from the top of the stairs, I heard it. Soft laughter. Hushed voices. And then, Camille's voice. "You always know how to make me feel better," she said, her tone dripping with something I hadn't heard in months. Something she had stopped using with me. A sharp pain tore through my chest, but I pushed forward. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. My heartbeat was in my ears, loud, deafening. Then I saw it. The bedroom door was open just enough for me to see inside. Marcus, Camille, together. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted around me. And then, before I even knew what I was doing, I pushed the door wide open. The moment stretched into eternity. Camille screamed. Marcus froze, his face draining of all color. For a long time, no one spoke. And then, as if on instinct, I turned around and walked away. "Wait, I can explain." Camille's voice cracked behind me, but I didn't stop. There was nothing left to explain. I stepped out of the house, into the night air, and let the first tear fall. I had lost her. Or maybe, she had been gone long before this night. I don't remember much of the drive home. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, my mind replaying the scene over and over again. Camille's scream, Marcus's frozen expression, the tangled sheets that told a story I had desperately tried to ignore for too long. I should have yelled, should have punched him, should have demanded answers. But what was the point? There was nothing left to say. The house felt empty when I stepped inside. The silence was suffocating. I shut the door behind me, but the world outside had already come crashing in. My wife, the woman who once told me she couldn't live without me, had chosen another man. Not just any man. My best friend. I sank onto the couch, my head falling into my hands. My chest was tight, my breaths uneven. I had spent months telling myself I was overthinking, convincing myself that Camille loved me, that I was imagining the distance between us. But I wasn't crazy. She had made me doubt my own instincts, made me feel like I was the one pushing her away when all along, she was the one running into someone else's arms. My phone buzzed beside me. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Still, I picked it up, staring at the screen. Camille. I let it ring, and then silence. A few seconds later, a text. "Please come back. We need to talk." I laughed. A bitter, humorless sound. We needed to talk? She had months to talk. She had months to tell me what was going on, to be honest about her feelings instead of sneaking around behind my back. She didn't want to talk. She wanted damage control. The phone buzzed again. "Please." I turned it over, face down. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I sat in the dark, staring at the empty space where my life used to feel whole. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard it, knocking. My body tensed. It was past midnight. I knew exactly who it was. For a second, I considered ignoring it. Let her stand out there. Let her sit in her own regret the way I had been forced to sit in my confusion for months. But I needed to face her. I needed to look her in the eye one last time, if only to confirm that the person I fell in love with was truly gone. With a deep breath, I got up, walked to the door, and pulled it open. There she was. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. Her hair was a mess, and she was still wearing the same clothes from earlier. I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice trembling. "That's funny," I said, my tone void of emotion. "You seem to know exactly where to go a few hours ago." She flinched. "Please, let's talk." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorway. "Talk? About what, Camille? How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I shook my head. "Never mind. I don't even want to know." "It didn't mean anything," she blurted. Something inside me snapped. "Don't," I warned. "Don't insult me by pretending this was just some meaningless mistake." She swallowed hard. I was confused. Confused? I let out a sharp breath, running a hand through my hair. "Camille, you spent months making me feel like I was crazy for suspecting something. You gaslit me into thinking I was paranoid while you were sleeping with my best friend." She shook her head quickly. "It wasn't like that." "Then explain it to me." I cut her off, my voice rising. "Explain how I found my wife in his bed." She looked away. I made a mistake, she whispered, but it didn't change the way I feel about you. I let out a bitter laugh. Are you listening to yourself? Camille, you broke us. You don't get to stand here and tell me it didn't change anything. Tears spilled down her face. I don't want to lose you. I stared at her, my heart aching. You already did. Her breath hitched. Please, can't we fix this? Fix this? I repeated, disbelief washing over me. You want me to just forget what I saw? To pretend like everything's fine? She sobbed. I don't know what I was thinking. I was selfish. I was stupid. Please, just tell me what I can do. I'll do anything. I shook my head, my chest tightening. You don't get to beg for this now, I said, my voice quieter, almost tired. You should have thought about this before you decided I wasn't enough. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. The moment her fingers missed mine, something shattered between us. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I love you. I closed my eyes for a second, letting those words settle. No, Camille, I said softly. You don't. You love the idea of me. You love the security I gave you, the way I made you feel safe. But you didn't love me. Because if you did, you wouldn't have done this. She sobbed harder, covering her face with her hands. I took a step back. Go home, Camille. Her body trembled. I don't have a home without you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You should have thought about that before you ran to him. And then, I did the one thing I never imagined I would do. I closed the door in her face. The sound of her crying on the other side echoed through the walls, but I didn't open it. I let her sob. I let her break, because she had already broken me first. The morning after I shut the door in Camille's face, I woke up feeling nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just an empty, hollow space where love used to live. I had spent years building a life with her. I had held her through every struggle, celebrated her victories, and sacrificed pieces of myself to keep us together. And yet, in the end, I was nothing more than an obstacle she had to step around to reach him. The realization settled over me like a thick fog. I was a fool. I had believed in us even when she had already moved on. And now, she was the one crying? No, I wouldn't let her make me the villain. The first thing I did that morning was ignore my phone. Calls, texts, voicemails, all from Camille. I refused to let her words worm their way into my thoughts again. I knew how this worked. She'd cry, beg, make excuses, try to twist things so that, somehow, I was the one to blame. She had already spent months convincing me I was crazy for suspecting her. Now she would try to convince me I was wrong for leaving her. Not this time. By noon, my mother called. Honey, I just spoke to Camille's mom. What's going on? I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. We're done, Mom. A long silence. What happened? I hesitated. As much as I wanted to dump every ugly detail into the world, I couldn't. I didn't want to hear the pity in her voice. She cheated, I said simply. With Marcus. Another silence. Then, a sharp inhale. Oh, honey, I don't even know what to say. There's nothing to say, I muttered. It is what it is. I could tell she was holding back words, probably debating whether or not to say something to make me feel better. But there was nothing to fix, nothing to soften. I wasn't looking for comfort. I just wanted to move forward. By evening, Camille had switched tactics. The calls and messages weren't just from her anymore. Her sister texted, she made a mistake. Don't throw your marriage away over this. Her mom left a voicemail. She's devastated. Please, talk to her before making any final decisions. Even Marcus had the audacity to reach out. Man, can we talk? I don't want things to end like this. I stared at his message, my hands tightening into fists. Like this? As if this was some misunderstanding? As if there was any version of reality where I could sit across from him and talk about how he had been sleeping with my wife behind my back? I turned off my phone. I couldn't listen to another second of their voices. I spent the next few days in autopilot, going to work, pretending like I wasn't unraveling inside. I didn't tell anyone the details, not even my closest friends. I knew what would happen. They would look at me with pity, shake their heads, say they always had a bad feeling about Marcus or never really liked Camille anyway. It didn't matter. Nothing anyone said would change the reality of what had happened. But eventually, I couldn't ignore her anymore. She showed up again. I had just gotten home when I heard the knocking. Not frantic this time. Steady. Persistent. I didn't want to answer. But I also knew Camille. If I didn't, she'd just keep coming back. So I opened the door. She stood there, looking worse than before. Her face pale, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled into a messy bun. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, almost cautiously, as if she were stepping into a life that no longer belonged to her. I closed the door and leaned against it, crossing my arms. "Say what you need to say." She turned to face me, her lips pressing together. "I know I don't deserve another chance." I said nothing. "But I need you to understand something," she continued, her voice shaky. "I never planned for this to happen." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, so you just accidentally fell into his bed?" She winced. "It wasn't like that." "Then explain it to me, Camille. Explain to me how you went from, 'I don't even like Marcus,' to screwing him behind my back." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was lonely." I stared at her. "Lonely?" She nodded, looking down at her hands. "You were always working. You were always so busy. And Marcus, he was there. He listened to me. I never meant to hurt you. But you did." My voice was cold. Her shoulders shook as she wiped at her face. "I know, and I hate myself for it." I took a deep breath, trying to steady the anger boiling inside me. "So what do you want from me now?" I asked. "Forgiveness?" She hesitated. "I don't know. I just don't want to lose you." I shook my head slowly. "You lost me the second you made the choice to betray me." She flinched as if I had slapped her. "Please, we can try counseling. We can rebuild this." I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, I realized something. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the woman I fell in love with. That Camille was long gone. All that was left was the wreckage. "No," I said finally. "I deserve better." Her face crumpled, a sob breaking free from her lips. I turned away, walking toward the door. "You should go," I said quietly. She didn't move at first, but after a long moment, I heard her footsteps. She walked past me, pausing briefly as if she wanted to say something more. But I didn't give her the chance. I opened the door and waited. With one final, broken look, she stepped outside, and I closed the door behind her. This time, for good. I never thought divorce would be something I'd have to think about. When I married Camille, I believed it was forever. That's what we both promised, through thick and thin, through joy and sorrow. But in the end, I was the only one who kept my vow. After she left that night, I sat in silence for hours. Not crying, not raging, just thinking. Thinking about all the little moments I had ignored. The way she used to light up when I entered a room, and how, over time, that light had faded. The way she would reach for my hand absent-mindedly, and how, eventually, she stopped. The way we used to talk for hours about everything and nothing, and how, one day, I realized I didn't know the last real conversation we had. Maybe our marriage had been dying for a long time. Maybe Marcus had only been the final push off the cliff. But that didn't make it hurt any less. The next morning, I called a lawyer. "I want to file for divorce," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The woman on the other end of the phone spoke calmly, professionally, as if she had guided 1,000 other men through the exact same process. Maybe she had. Maybe I was just another name in the long list of people who had learned the hard way that love wasn't always enough. We set an appointment. I hung up the phone. Then I texted Camille. "I'm filing for divorce. You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon." I expected her to call immediately, to beg, to cry, to fight. But for the first time in months, there was only silence. Maybe she finally understood. Or maybe she was preparing for the next battle. 2 days later, she showed up at my apartment again. I opened the door and found her standing there, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept in days. "Don't do this," she whispered. "You think I'm going to change my mind?" I asked, crossing my arms. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But isn't marriage supposed to be about fighting for each other? Her voice cracked. About working through the worst? I let out a slow breath. Marriage is supposed to be about trust, Camille. You killed that. She swallowed hard. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'll do anything to fix this. Counseling. Therapy. We don't have to throw everything away. I stared at her, my jaw tightening. We. I repeated. There is no we anymore. You threw me away when you chose him. She flinched, tears spilling down her face. I wasn't thinking straight. I was lost. I was hurting. And instead of coming to me, you went to Marcus, I said bitterly. She shook her head. I was stupid. I made a mistake. But you and I, we have years together. We built a life. Doesn't that mean something? It meant something to me, I said quietly, but not to you. Because if it did, you wouldn't have risked it. Her hands trembled. I don't want to lose you. You already did. She sobbed, covering her mouth with her hand. Then she said the words that shattered the last remaining pieces of me. I got pregnant. The world tilted. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. What? My voice barely worked. I didn't know if it was yours or his, she whispered, looking down. So I had an abortion. I stumbled back a step. You what? I didn't want to tell you, she cried. I didn't want to break you more than I already had. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped me. Oh, that was where you drew the line? You thought lying to me for months was fine, but sparing me this would somehow make it better. She sobbed harder. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know how to look you in the eye anymore. I was drowning in guilt. Not enough to stop, I said coldly. She let out a shaky breath. I was scared, okay? I made every possible mistake, but I don't want to lose you. I stared at her, the woman who had once been my world, the woman I had built a future with, and I felt nothing but emptiness. This is done, Camille, I said. I hope, one day, you understand what you've lost. She wiped her face, nodding like she already knew she had lost. I stepped back and shut the door. This time, she didn't knock again. She didn't call. She didn't text. Maybe she finally understood that I wasn't coming back. I was done. I sank onto the couch, exhaling shakily. My body felt heavy, my heart exhausted. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her ruin me. I would heal. I would move forward. And this time, I wouldn't look back. Camille survived, but something inside her had broken. I wasn't sure if it was guilt, regret, or the realization that she had finally lost control over me. Whatever it was, it had taken its toll. She was kept in the hospital for a few days before they transferred her to a psychiatric facility for evaluation. Her mother called me constantly, her voice heavy with worry. She keeps asking for you, she said one evening. Please, just go see her. I didn't answer right away. It wasn't that I didn't care. Despite everything, I had loved Camille once. I had built a life with her, shared years of memories. But love wasn't a get-out-of-jail-free card for betrayal. I had already gone to the hospital. I had given her the closure she wanted. I wasn't going to be her emotional crutch anymore. I can't, I finally said, my voice firm. She needs to heal. But I can't be a part of that anymore. Her mother sighed, but she didn't argue. She knew the damage was too deep. 2 weeks later, I hadn't heard from Camille, not directly. Her family had kept me updated, but I refused to get pulled back into her orbit. Instead, I focused on myself. I went to work. I reconnected with friends. I forced myself to wake up each morning and not think about the past. But the past had a funny way of showing up uninvited. One night, I ran into Marcus. It was bound to happen eventually. We lived in the same town, had mutual friends, even frequented the same bars. But I hadn't expected it to happen so soon. I was leaving the grocery store when I saw him. He was walking toward me, looking hesitant, almost nervous. He had the decency to look ashamed, but I wasn't in the mood for his guilt. Hey man, he said carefully. I stared at him. Just the sight of him made my stomach twist. This was the man I had called brother. The man I had trusted with my secrets, my childhood, my friendship. And in the end, he had taken the one thing he knew he shouldn't. I don't have anything to say to you, I said flatly. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I get that. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I let out a humorless laugh. Sorry? Sorry for what, Marcus? Sleeping with my wife? Lying to my face? Or for finally getting caught? He flinched but didn't look away. I was in a bad place, man, he said. After Jasmine died, I wasn't myself. I was drinking too much, making reckless choices, and Camille was just another reckless choice. I cut him off, my voice sharp. His jaw tensed. No, he admitted. She wasn't. I already knew that. I don't care why you did it, I said, stepping past him. I just know that I'll never trust you again. He didn't stop me. He didn't try to plead his case, because there was nothing left to say. 3 months later, by the time the divorce was finalized, I felt like a different person. I had spent so much time drowning in betrayal, grief, and anger that I hadn't realized how much lighter I felt without Camille's shadow hanging over me. There was no more checking my phone, wondering if she was texting him. No more late nights spent second-guessing myself, wondering if I was being paranoid or jealous. No more feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. I was free. The last time I saw Camille, it wasn't in a hospital or a courtroom. It was by chance at a park. I had gone for a morning run, my headphones in, my mind clear for the first time in months. And then, I saw her. She was sitting on a bench, looking out at the water. She looked different, thinner, tired, but there was something else in her expression. Acceptance. For the first time in a long time, she looked like she wasn't trying to manipulate me. She turned and saw me. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then, she gave me a small, sad smile. I nodded. And that was it. No words. No pleading. No last-minute confessions. Just two people who had once loved each other, now standing in the wreckage of what used to be. I walked away. And this time, I didn't look back. Moving forward. People always talk about heartbreak like it's one big moment, one devastating, dramatic collapse. But it isn't. It's a slow, agonizing unraveling. It's months of small betrayals, of doubts creeping in, of losing yourself piece by piece until you wake up one day and realize that the person you loved is gone. Camille had been gone long before I caught her in that bedroom. I had just been too blind to see it. But now, I saw everything clearly. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't holding on to the past. I wasn't drowning in what-ifs or regrets. I was just me, and that was enough. I never imagined myself as the kind of man who would get divorced. Not because I thought I was perfect, but because I believed in the sanctity of marriage. I believed in commitment, in fighting through the hard times, in choosing love even when it wasn't easy. But when I looked back, I realized I had been the only one fighting. Camille had let go of our marriage long before I had. Now, for the first time in years, I was standing on my own. And as much as it hurt, as much as the weight of betrayal still sat in my chest like an old wound, I knew one thing for certain. I had survived. But survival wasn't the same as healing. The struggle of moving on. The weeks after the divorce were strange. Some days, I felt fine, almost light, like I had finally been freed from a heavy chain I didn't even realize I was dragging. Other days, I felt the loss like a punch to the gut. I had to unlearn Camille. I had to unlearn the way I reached for my phone whenever something funny happened, instinctively wanting to text her. I had to unlearn the smell of her perfume that still lingered in my closet. Had to fight the way my body still tensed every time I drove past the coffee shop we used to visit on Saturday mornings. I had to unlearn the habits, the routines, the expectations I had built my life around. And it was hard. Really hard. One night, I found myself scrolling through old pictures on my phone. Our wedding day, vacations, lazy Sundays in bed. She had been my person, my best friend. How had we gone from that to this? I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly before forcing myself to delete every single photo. It felt like severing a limb, but I did it anyway. Because the past couldn't be the thing that held me hostage anymore. Facing the world again. Divorce changes you in ways you don't expect. Suddenly, friends didn't know how to act around me. Some offered forced sympathy, others just disappeared. The couples we used to double date with avoided me, as if divorce was a disease they were afraid of catching. Man, I don't even know what to say, my coworker admitted one day at lunch. You don't have to say anything, I told him, taking a sip of my coffee. Still, it sucks. I always thought you guys were solid. Yeah, I said, nodding. So did I. There wasn't much else to say. I wasn't interested in drowning in pity. I wasn't interested in being the guy who spent the rest of his life bitter and broken over a woman who had already moved on. So, I did what I had to do. I went to therapy. I forced myself to rebuild. I took weekend trips. I joined a gym. I started going out again, not to drink my problems away, but just to live. And slowly, something strange started to happen. I started feeling like myself again. Not the man who had been betrayed. Not the husband who had been cheated on. Just me. The unexpected message. One evening, as I was sitting on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, my phone buzzed. I picked it up absent-mindedly, expecting it to be one of my friends. But when I saw the name on the screen, my stomach twisted. Camille. I hesitated before opening the message. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted to say I'm sorry again. I know I've said it before, but I needed you to know I really mean it. I hope you're doing okay. I stared at the message for a long time. Months ago, I would have agonized over this. I would have analyzed every word, every intention. I would have wondered if this was her way of trying to come back into my life. But now, I just felt indifferent. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her. I just didn't care anymore. And that realization hit me harder than anything else. I had moved on. Without replying, I locked my phone and set it aside. Some things didn't need a response. Some things just needed to be left behind. The road ahead. Healing isn't a straight line. There were still moments where the past tried to claw its way back in. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Not just about moving on. Not just about finding love again. But about myself. I had been broken. I had been betrayed. But I had come out the other side stronger. And as I stood there, watching the city lights, breathing in the crisp night air, I finally let out the breath I had been holding for far too long. Moving on isn't a decision you make once. It's something you choose every single day. Some mornings, I woke up and felt completely free. Like my past was just a distant memory. Like Camille's betrayal was something that happened to a different version of me. Other days, I could feel the weight of it settle on my chest like a dull ache. But the difference now? It didn't control me anymore. I had stopped waiting for an apology to fix things. I had stopped asking why she did it. I had stopped letting her choices define me. I was moving forward, step by step, a new beginning. It was 6 months after the divorce when I decided to do something for myself. I had spent so long trying to survive, trying to put myself back together, that I hadn't thought about what I wanted. Not what I lost. Not what I was healing from. But what was next? I wasn't the same person I was before Camille's betrayal. That man had believed in forever. He had trusted blindly, loved unconditionally. But the man I was now, he was smarter, wiser, stronger, and he wasn't afraid of starting over. So, I booked a trip. It wasn't some dramatic, soul-searching journey across the world. Just a weekend getaway, somewhere new, somewhere that didn't hold memories of my past life. For the first time in a long time, I felt excited. Not because I was running from anything, but because I was finally running towards something. Letting go. Before I left for my trip, I decided to do one last thing. I gathered everything that still tied me to Camille. Old letters, wedding photos, keepsakes I had shoved into a drawer but hadn't been able to throw away yet. I looked through them one last time, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt done. So, I took it all outside, lit a small fire in my backyard, and let it burn. One by one, the pictures curled in the flames. Our wedding day. Our first home together. The love notes she used to leave in my lunchbox. It all turned to ashes. I watched as the smoke rose into the night sky, carrying the last remnants of our past with it. And when the fire finally died down, I felt lighter than I had in years. Because Camille was no longer a weight on my shoulders. She was just someone I used to know. The unexpected encounter. Fate has a funny sense of humor. Just when you think you've closed a chapter, life finds a way to test you. It happened a week after my trip. I was at a coffee shop, waiting for my order, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. I turned around, and there she was. Camille. She looked different. Not just physically, though she did seem thinner, more tired, but emotionally. The confidence she once carried was gone. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. Then, she gave me a small, hesitant smile. "How have you been?" she asked. I studied her, realizing for the first time that I no longer felt that ache in my chest. "I've been good," I said honestly. "Really good." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I'm glad." Silence stretched between us. "I never got the chance to thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For loving me the way you did." I exhaled slowly, nodding. "I loved you with everything I had, Camille." She blinked rapidly, as if trying to hold back tears. "I know, and I ruined it." "Yeah," I said, my voice calm. "You did." She swallowed hard, and for a moment, I saw the regret in her eyes, the weight of everything she had lost. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. "Take care of yourself, Camille," I said, grabbing my coffee. She gave me a watery smile. "You too." And just like that, I walked away. For the last time. The road ahead. Healing isn't about getting revenge. It isn't about proving to someone that you're better off without them. It's about finally being at peace with what happened, without needing an apology to move forward. It's about knowing that you gave your best, and if someone threw it away, that's their loss, not yours. I don't know what the future holds for me, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. Because I'm not defined by the love that broke me. I'm defined by the way I put myself back together. And that's a story worth telling.